Welcome back, party people. How exciting is this? First Transformers fans, first Friday of the year. And it was a doozy, was it not? 14, that's 7. Imagine this, I've got an extra 2 hands doing this. I don't know why I held up 7 fingers. 14 figures. That's a big haul. That's a lot. Normally we get like what, 5, 6 tops? 14. Let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for stopping by. I had a great time. That was a real deep dive. It was also a bigger panel than usual, right? Isn't it? Wasn't it? And I feel like we went a little deeper on the franchise than we often do. I must admit, but the first section where they were talking about all the video games and stuff and the comics and that didn't really do it for me. I ended up staying awake and watching it live, which, you know, for me in Australia was like midnight. So having to sit through like VR and mobile games and comics that I'm not particularly interested in, not because I don't like the comics, but just because I don't think these comics have been particularly good since they, you know, shifted away from the whole Lost Light kind of dealio. But we got through it, and then we finally got onto some toys. So I think if I was them, I probably would have flipped the running order that they did, because I'm pretty sure most of you were like me, and the most exciting stuff that we got to see was actually all the Studio Series things. It's good, right? Like, they've seemed to be completely done with your standard Bayverse designs, which I'm completely okay with, right? I know there's like the younger end of the fandom is like, yeah, cool, oh, they look like cockroaches made out of metal. But, not about it. It's not for me. I do find myself really liking the Bumblebee Studio Series stuff. So, to that end, we got to have a look at RC, and we'd had a little like sneaky peek of RC like late last year, but this year we get to see in the flesh? Not really. In the metal? I don't know. Whatever. We got to see like a product sample, and that was really cool. I kind of like how she had the side swipe wheelie feet kind of dealio. And also, is that not just a really good way to go about RC's alt mode? The motorbike car kind of dealio? The sort of like Tron-esque paddle pop? I was a fan. I'm definitely picking up this figure. I have been very impressed with what they've been doing with the Bumblebee Studio Series stuff so far. There's not really any robot mode sacrifices being made to get these alt modes because they can come afterwards. They were talking about it, how it was like a refreshing change to be like, here's a robot, see what you can do with the vehicle mode. And so that's why I think we're really getting like that robot mode look first, and I am all about it. I think all of us, the second that we saw Ratchet, knew that we would invariably be getting an Ironhide. I've got Ratchet now. Here's one I prepared earlier. The second I started fiddling around with this mofo, it was very clear to me that he's gonna make a sick Ironhide. I also, at first when they were showing him off, I was like, oh, somehow they've given him a different alt mode, but just that radically different deco just made him feel like he had a really distinct alt mode. So that was really cool. So that was like the Bumblebee offerings. Then we got to get a little 86 with it, which I think we all love. It is a shame, I do feel bad for them that they weren't able to like, bam, come out first with Junkyard that we saw. I don't mind when we see some like, you know, leaked teasy photos. I'm not a huge fan of the whole, you know, snuck across the border factory sample kind of dealio. It does take a lot of the wind out of their sails with the reveals. Like, it would have been really cool if that was, oh my god, Junkyard, I knew they were going to do it, but there's already like video reviews out. You know who I'm talking about. It was interesting getting to hear them talk about how initially they weren't sure if they were going to have the budget for, you know, to be able to do that partial. They had planned on the head, but then they ended up having some budget left over for the body, and I think that that was definitely the right place to put it, right? Because now if you wanted to, that you've got 2 Junkions, you could have like Junkyard's chest with Retgar's arms. And you could have Retgar's chest with Junkyard's arms. Mix it up, end up getting another 2 Junkions out of it. Slight differences, if they paint them different it'll work, but I would happily have 4 of them. Happily have 8 of them. No, I wouldn't. 8's too many, but 4! I'll do 4. It was funny as well that they almost forgot to even talk about Spike and his exosuit. That one, it's kind of weird that somehow in some places it managed to get to retail before they got to reveal it. I remember the same thing sort of happened with Tigertron, like Kingdom Tigertron. That was everywhere, and then they were like, "Oh look, surprise!" I was like, not that big a surprise, boys. I don't know about all of y'all, but for me, personally, my highlight was 100% getting to have a Bo Peep at Sludge. That looked very cool. I am finding with these 86 Dinobots, they are a little on the plainer side of things, but that was their design, so what can you do? They definitely have that wow factor in person of like, you know, the size of them. So that's the 3 original Dinobots we've all seen now. I'm still really hoping that they do Snarl and Swoop. Swoop, I think, is a sure bet. Snarl, I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, well, he kind of didn't make it off world, we might not bother with Snarl, but they have been pretty good to us lately, so maybe they will. He did look great, but I particularly like that they managed to pack that extra articulation into his dinosaur mode. I thought that was pretty cool. I think a fun accessory would have been if there was like, you know, a tiny little like 3mm port on top of his head, and then it came with a set of cartoon googly eyes so that you could recreate that whole like boom, devastator, king hit smash, like kind of effect, but maybe that's just me. Either way, that I think of the studio series, I'll get all the studio series that they showed us, but the one that I'm hanging out for the most is definitely that Sludge. He looked real good. Except for his gun. That gun looked kind of dumb. But what do you do? So far, all 3 of them have come with some pretty lame accessories. Just give us the swords. Now, I know there's a lot of people like, well, actually, I think you will find that the swords never appeared in the film, making them much more accurate. I think you'll find no one cares, and that those accessories are pretty important to people. They would just look so much cooler if you could have them standing there with gun in one hand, sword in the other, because that's how a Dinobot do. So I'm not going to lie, this next part of proceedings I was a little bit underwhelmed by, because we have already seen sneaky pics of all of these guys. Like I said before, love a sneaky pic, makes me feel like I'm a detective with a string board piecing it all together. Not a big fan of the early review. Take some of the fun out of like being out there hunting in the streets. I like to go out, get my Craven on, and find me a Spider-Man. Or in this case, a robot. But anyway, they were like, cool, we got some Legacy reveals. Who wants to see some new Legacy? And I was like, hot diggity. I would like to see some new Legacy. And then it was just those 3 Beast repaints. And personally, of all the Kingdom Beast molds that we got, I think those are the 3 weakest. They're my 3 least favorite of them. So I can't super see myself actually picking up any of these guys. Maybe if I see them in store, I might get Buzzsaw, because he's a cool little army builder guy, he packs it out. But I definitely won't be getting Sandstorm, and I definitely won't be getting Night Prowler, or whatever the hot diggity dog his name was. I would have rathered, instead of those 3, if they'd used that money to maybe just do like K9, right? That'd be cool. They used that dog a whole bunch. Or if it had been a bigger remold and we got some of like the Beast Wars 2, Beast Wars Neo, like, I'm a cyber beast, that would have excited me more. I was genuinely surprised to find out that these are going to be Legacy figures, because I would have thought for sure, given what has to be the limited appeal of these 3, that they would have been Gen Selects releases. But no, seemingly mainline. What you gonna do? The vintage Beast Wars, when they started talking about that, I thought, cool, we're going to go into Cyber Shark and maybe see what else they've got planned. Polar Claw? Huh? Polar Claw? Do Polar Claw. Because if you do Polar Claw, then you could give us Barbarian and Grizzly 1. That would make me very happy. Instead, they showed us Scorponok and Tigertron, which I might be mistaken, but I swear to God they've been showing up in retail all over the shop already, so that wasn't quite the dramatic reveal that I think they'd hoped it was. But I'm still excited. I've got an original Scorponok, but if I see him in person, I probably will pick up this reissue Scorponok, because his colour scheme's a bit different. It's a little bit more like he was in the show, which is just enough for me to be able to loosely justify picking up another version of him. Who else would we like to see from Beast Wars? I would love it, if they could just get past the initial run of Beast Wars and maybe get on to some of the trans metals and trans metals 2. I understand that that'll probably be a lot harder because of the vac metal, but I would forgive them if they just did a metallic paint job on that. Similarly, I would also love it if some of the harder to get Japanese Beast Wars stuff got a re-release to make it that little bit more accessible for people. I think that'd be nice. I want a long rack, okay? Sue me. I want a long rack. Next, they showed us a couple of red figures, which I get what they're going for, but every time I've seen a video or seen people talk about any of the red figures, the prevailing sentiment seems to be that the quality is low and the whole point of them being the enhanced articulation and sculpt and stuff isn't quite there because they seem to be made out of plasticine. I was so sure that as a fandom that we were done with just making Optimus Prime white and trying to pass him off as Ultra Magnus. That's just so early 2000s. Not about it. Leave it out. Leave it out. I think Ultra Magnus would have been a good opportunity for them to add a second scale class to the red figures and try that on and see how that goes. Or why not use the non-transforming red figures to do like Banzaitron and maybe Mainframe and some of the actual like Action Masters, because at least then you could be like, well cool, it's an Action Master so I can have them in my regular display because they're not supposed to transform. I will say Knockout did look pretty cool, but I'm fairly certain that we're getting a Knockout that's a partial from the Studio Series 86 Jazz mold. Which seems like a pretty good use for him, for Legacy. I can get behind that. And then finally, to close out the show, we got to see some of the things they have planned with the buzzworthy Bumblebee line. I still think it's a weird line, but I have been enjoying some of the things that they've been doing with it. Oh, side note, sidebar, I finally managed to find a reasonably priced version of like that first episode Space Disc Bumblebee. Ooh, cannot wait to get that one. I was also very glad to see the alt version of B127 with like his regular Bumblebee head in a sort of richer, creamier yellow. That initial figure's yellow is kind of the reason I didn't bother picking up that version of Bumblebee. So now that they're doing all those other Bumblebee figures, I had been feeling a little bit of remorse that I hadn't picked him up. So it is really good to know that we're going to get another version which, to me, I like more than that initial version that came out. I'm not super sure how I feel about what they've done with Cup and Cliff Jumper. I did find it interesting the conversation they were having about the translucent parts, and I did like, you know, Mark lamenting how difficult it is to get paint apps to sit richly on the translucent plastic. In the case of Cup, how he's got that little, you know, mark on his chest that he had in the movie, I really like that, and I think his colors are a bit more true to the film. What would have made an extra point of difference for me to make sure that I definitely picked that up is if we'd gotten rid of that Willem Dafoe head and he had another head sculpt. Because they spend the whole time talking about how, you know, they scope out online to see what people are seeing and how people are vibing about the figures. And if that's the case, surely they realise that nobody particularly likes that head sculpt. It makes everyone a little bit uncomfortable. Cliff Jumper, I definitely can't be bothered picking that up. Sure, he's that little bit more cartoon accurate, but who cares? I'm wondering who else they might pick out from 86 to end up putting in that buzzworthy Bumblebee line. It'll be interesting. So yeah, that's that. That was it. Who else watched it? Did you watch it? Did you check it out? I find one of the best things about, you know, actually watching the thing is getting to hear those little behind the scenes biddies. I think it would be a good idea of Hasbro if they were like, hey Mark, you're a weird super stoner guy. Would you like to start your own behind the scenes channel where you have a look in some factories, go and visit some of the design tables, have a look like that? Because I definitely think that Mark is the most charismatic of the bunch, and so I would be leading with him to the front of the franchise, personally. Thank you all so much for coming with me and exploring this wrap up, talking it out. I always find it helps me, you know, get it out of my head from percolating to be able to stop past and talk to you all about it. Hit me up in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let's get nerdy with it.